Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I hope many of you are having a great time, whether you're at a conference or just making it happen every day, trying to bridge the achievement gap, help students, help families, just wishing you all the best. And I'm so happy that you joined me. First things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on X Factor EDU Network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph. You can also find it on Spotify. In addition, you can check out this platform also on my social media outlets, which are listed here. So you'll have Facebook as Miss India White, LinkedIn is The India White, Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach, Instagram is Indie238, YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. Check out the website, www.india-white.com, for books or blogs or to schedule me for a speaking or coaching event. In addition to events, if you're wanting to catch me somewhere, I think many of you are catching me this week at NCTM or NCSM. I'm just thankful to be among you guys. And then also I'm doing my best to see what we can do regarding NATM in Nebraska, also ICTM in Iowa. I'm supposed to hang out with Ohio, or also slotted for ATM and E. We also have the Northwest Math Conference. There's also South Carolina Conference, and there's the Making Math Moments virtual summit that we're a part of. And there's some other ones. There's FAMS Conference, and there's also FAMT conference. So I'm super excited about meeting you guys at all of those different events. Now, I wanted to remind you, if you have tutoring or students that need tutoring, just send them my way and we will get them taken care of this school year through the G.R.I.T Academy. Now, with that said, I want to talk with you about education and about, I guess, one of the elephants in the room, kind of, how we can really support leadership in education as well, so that we can also support students. And so with that said, I want to talk about the power of BIPOC representation in the classroom. So when I say representation, I'm talking about demographically speaking, the makeup of someone, the likeness, the image of someone, and their visibility in the classroom space, in the school space, in leadership space. So with that said, I do want to get into a couple of things for you that talks about this data and also gives, tips and supports as to how we can increase representation in our schools. So this is coming from the National Center of Education Statistics. Okay. And it says race and ethnicity of public school teachers and their students. Okay. And this is the U.S. Department of Education. This was released in 2020, around the same time that we first, had that batch of NAEP data. And of course, they've updated it since. So this is the data point, and it says they examine the race and ethnicity of public school teachers in the United States, and it uses the data from public school teacher data files from 2017, 2018. So it's still relevant. And so in 2017, 2018, they found that 79% of public school teachers were white and non-Hispanic. About 9% of teachers were Hispanic of any race. 7% were Black and non-Hispanic. So again, this was in 2017, 2018. You see the data right here. 79% of public school teachers are white. 9% Hispanic. 7% were Black and non-Hispanic. Only 2% were identified as Asian and non-Hispanic. And then 2% also two or more races, and less than 1% were Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander or American Indian, Alaska Native, non-Hispanic. So it says, note that in the rest of this report, non-Hispanic is not repeated after each racial category in order to improve readability. So they're just kind of saying, you got to do your work there, right? So here's the map. Wow. Of disparity and representation. So this is what we just read. See this? So they actually were being generous to say even 2% American Indian, because if you look at the map over here, I'm highlighting the map. If you look at this map, see the figures in the map? It's showing us, guys, wow. Whew. And I think these numbers, I think it's actually more now Caucasian or white teachers. So 79% are white. And then look down to American Indian, only not even 1%, 0.5% are American Indian, and only 6.7% are Black African American, 9% Hispanic, 2% Asian. There's a lot of work to be done. So we really have to start questioning, what is the hiring process like, and why are these numbers the way they are? And so it says here, there's an agreement between the race and ethnicity of teachers, and the majority of race of the student population was most pronounced for white teachers. In schools where the majority of students were white, over 90% of the students or of the teachers were white. At schools where the majority of teachers were Black, about 36%, only 36% of those teachers were Black. And then it says, similarly, at schools in which the majority of students were Hispanic, 33% were Hispanic. And at schools in which a majority of students were American Indian, you had about 29% of teachers that were American Indian and 19% were Native American, Pacific Islander, respectively. Very interesting. And it says at most, or at schools in which students were Asian, you had about 27% of teachers that were Asian. So then they school us here. So here's another graph. It's some distribution of teachers and some disparities. So let's look and see. So it says, at the same time, the schools where the majority of students were not white, the majority of teachers tended to be white. The majority of teachers were white in schools where the majority of students were 54% Hispanic, 54% Black, 60% Asian, or 61% also American Indian and Alaska Native. And then schools in which a majority of students were Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, at those schools you had 26% of teachers that were white, 26% of teachers that were Asian, 19% were Native American Pacific Islander, and 20% were two or more races. So very humbling data. And you can see here the graphs. Wow. This is a lot. So this is of the students. See this? So this is a lot. So it says here, the black bar represents white non-Hispanic students. You had about 93% white non-Hispanic. And then it says Black non-Hispanic were 2%. Hispanics were 3%. Asians, 1%. There were nothing on Native American Pacific Islanders in this particular column. So this is very interesting. This is talking about student body composition there. Now, that was going over data because data really gives you a starting point as to really identify what the problem is and or how you can support. So the first thing is you can't say we have to just totally annihilate the system, get rid of all the teachers, make it balanced. We know that just really is not a reality that will go peacefully. I think that would be a lot. But I think what we can do is definitely provide supports to all teachers, no matter their backgrounds, but at the same time, continue to advocate for teachers of the BIPOC community so that there can be that diverse representation in classrooms. And let me tell you, there's something about having a diverse teacher or leader that is comforting and makes you feel like you can win. Now, if you look back at the data that I mentioned, it mentioned that we had about 90% of teachers, about 80, right? I think it's, yeah. So about 80 to 90% of teachers are Caucasian or white. And more than 50% of the student body was either African American or Hispanic. So already when you're dealing with that, you're coming to the table with some social gaps, cultural gaps. And some people have mentioned that, there's like a caste system in America and it's based off of like skin color. Like, so unfortunately, because there are just so many different things that can lead to these discrepancies and these disparities, we have to be more intentional and more proactive, more active at making decisions that can help level the playing field so that students can become inspired and feel like they can win. And personal story, the first African American person that I saw that was successful, that stuck with me, that was a role model that I looked up to, was my mentor. Now, I was 17 years old the first time I saw someone, African American female, successful, thriving. Despite the fact that I did have an African American teacher, female, in my second grade class, she did not really make a big impact on me. I want to say it was because she was very muted, if that's the word that I can say. So just kind of muted, which is really sad. It seems like many people in the BIPOC community, it's like once they get in a certain field, a certain position or whatever, they can't really be the help they want to be because they're chained or they're muted, they're silenced, just by the system and by the threats and the things that they have to go through, right? So, but I remember she was not really like vocal. I don't even remember her voice. I don't remember. But my mentor, who, and she did this out of the goodness of her heart, just came into my life, when I was a homeless, at-risk youth at the time, and she was very active. She worked out. She was a journalist. She was on TV. She had her master's. She was something I wanted. She represented a greater quality of life, and she's still in my life today, and I'm thankful for that. But I think how many students can say that they have that representation, either from a teacher or from a mentor in their school? Not many. I remember being at a school where, demographic wise, I think there were like over 2,500, 2,400 students, something like that. And there were about 200 plus teachers, but the demographics were that in the school of over 200, you only had 4 employees that were African American total. And in all areas, not just teaching. So can you imagine being in that type of field? What certain students of the BIPOC community might feel like. It might feel icy, they might not feel like they can open up and trust and all this because they might not be convinced that they're yet accepted, right? So there's much work to be done. And so I think that, we have to continue to dig here and see what can we do to support. So here's an article that I found and policy opportunities to recruit and retain BIPOC teachers. Okay, so let's see who came up with this for us. It just says Educators for Excellence, the Education Trust. Okay, so it says, for the first time since launching the Voices of the Classroom 2022 survey, the Educators for Excellence conducted a parallel survey of BIPOC, which means Black, Indigenous, and people of color, to talk to these rock star teachers to better understand their perspective and how it differs from, larger national samples. So they're talking about the survey and what happened as a result. So it says, we know that recruiting and retaining BIPOC teachers is critical because more than 50% of the students in public schools across the United States identify as people of color, while only 20% of their teachers and principals do. And while the share of BIPOC educators has increased over the past several decades, it hasn't kept pace with increasing the share of students of color. I don't like using that term, students of color. It really irks my nerves, to be honest. And then it says, research on the importance of narrowing the gap is clear. Students of diverse backgrounds who have teachers who look like them, look at this data. They have a higher reading and math achievement score, and they're more likely to graduate high school and enroll in college. Let's repeat that. So maybe representation is an answer for all of us. Students of color, or students of diverse backgrounds, as I like to call it, it says that these students, when they have teachers that look like them, they have higher reading and math achievement scores, and they're more likely to graduate high school and enroll in college. And all students, including white students, benefit socially, emotionally, and academically from having teachers of diverse backgrounds in front of the classroom. So it says, knowing the importance about BIPOC teachers, this moment presents a particular threatening and unique challenge. So across the country, they say that the enrollment in teacher preparation programs is dropping, and due to the widespread contract stipulation that teachers who were most recently hired are laid off first, and all the works districts have done to increase the percentages of BIPOC teachers in recent years may be undone. So together with the Education Trust, an organization that fiercely advocates for higher academic achievement for all students, particularly students of diverse backgrounds or students in poverty, it says they found relevant findings from Voices from the Classroom 2022. Okay, so they're talking about how now, in order to support and to counteract the fact that there's not that diverse representation, we have to be strategic about recruitment of BIPOC teachers. So let's look and see what they say. They say, despite the critical importance, we lose BIPOC teachers at each step of their journey toward becoming a teacher. I wonder why. It says it's due to a number of systemic barriers. Because of these barriers, people of diverse backgrounds are less likely than their white counterparts to enroll in bachelor degree programs, to enroll specifically in education preparation programs, and to complete that program if they do enroll. It says because people of diverse backgrounds graduate with more student debt than white graduates do, some researchers hypothesize that low pay makes teaching an impractical choice for BIPOC graduates, thus driving them away from the profession. In order to change this equation and increase the number of students taught by teachers who look like them, we must elevate the voices and opinions of BIPOC teachers. So in this here, it says, Voices from the Classroom 2022, BIPOC teachers reported starkly different answers. Wow. Regarding how long they plan to stay in the classroom, and then overall, and I guess other things regarding a nationwide sample. It says, while 86% of the national sample reports that they are likely to spend their entire career as a classroom teacher, only 52% of BIPOC teachers report the same. Wow. So here's the data. So when they asked all teachers, they said 86% likely. BIPOC teachers said 52% likely. And then it's saying here's some other responses of BIPOC educators when they asked, what is the most likely to attract talented, or what is most likely to attract talented and diverse teachers to the profession? And they said, I love it, 46 or 41% leadership pathways. Pathways for school aides and PR professionals, right? Residency programs, having streamlined certification, also having alternative certification pathways, and then, of course, raising the bar for entry. Very interesting. So it says, in places like Chicago, right, where, we have NCTM and CSM, it says, where teachers are required to live in the city to teach in the school system, and the cost of living is high, they need to consider housing support and how that's even more crucial. In the survey, 73% of BIPOC teachers listed that housing support was one of their top 3 financial levers for both recruiting and retaining teachers, only compared to 32% of the national sample. Look at that. This is screaming to us. 73 of them said, 73% said yes. 32% of other teachers said yes. Wow. So it's almost half, right? So then they say, what else can we do, right? Think about it. What is causing, the situation where BIPOC teachers and leaders aren't feeling like they belong? So it says, here's an education trust report titled, If You Listen, We Will Stay, Why Teachers of Color Leave and How to Disrupt Teacher Turnover. So there's 5 causes of why BIPOC educators leave. 1, they are experiencing an antagonistic school culture. What does that mean? Maybe they just aren't able to be themselves. Maybe they don't feel like they belong. Maybe they look too different for everyone. Their uniqueness is working against them. 2, feeling undervalued, right? Nobody wants to feel undervalued. 3, being deprived of agency and autonomy. There you go. 4, it says here, navigating unfavorable working conditions. And then 5, bearing the high cost of being, a teacher of color. So very interesting. And so then now let's keep going. It says, in the national sample, salary was a clear top mechanism that would retain teachers, with 78% of all teachers saying it would keep them in profession. However, 22% of BIPOC teachers said salary was one of the top choices, but more of 41% of them said it was their top choice. Very interesting. So here's national versus BIPOC community, and you can see the disparities. Look at that. Look at this huge outlier here. 7% of teachers said, yeah, I want more professionalism or more professional development support. And only 41% said, or 41%, of BIPOC community said yes for professional support. This is very interesting. So I think you guys should, take a stab at that. Look at that whenever you get a chance, some time, just to understand how those worlds of, retention and dealing with, beautiful BIPOC leaders, male and female, in the education space. And then, if the teachers are feeling like that, I'm sure the administrators also have a voice in the matter. And we have to keep that in mind whenever we're trying to reach all learners and really provide representation. One thing I will say, there's a difference between like representation and tokenism. So whenever you have representation, it means that that person can blossom in that environment. There's opportunities for them to advance. They're well taken care of. They feel like they fit, in the environment. They're on the team kind of thing. But if you have the tokenism, then that is more of you're there as a placeholder, but you're devalued. You're not really given an opportunity to like teach or to explore like you would hope, because the one thing you're trying to do is survive. You don't feel like your talents are being tapped into. And if you produce, content at your school or whatever, it's credited to someone else, right? You came up with an idea for that project, that Pi Day project, and then all of a sudden somebody else of a different, demographic will present it on your behalf and will leave you out of it. And so then that can also cause, diverse leaders to feel like, what's the use? Why try? So I bring this to us because there has to be change. It does not have to stay this way. And I think it's going to take a team effort, a concerted effort of everyone joining together across this nation and advocating for BIPOC leaders so that our BIPOC students can be well served. And so some ways that I think we can do that is simply by putting in a positive word of mouth for a BIPOC leader. And if you have the power, if you're in a power seat, remove the blockages and the hindrances that might disturb the advancement or the support or the favor of a BIPOC leader. If you have a platform, if you have influence, invite someone of a diverse background to join you, so that you guys can do great work together. You can get their voices amplified. And then when you're teaching BIPOC students, give them celebratory moments in the classroom where you're celebrating them for who they are. And then do some things that are unique. Choose to celebrate their work and praise them in front of their peers. This article for us, and it says BIPOC students and bias in higher education, the necessity of unlearning biases to optimize outcomes for BIPOC students. So it says the realities of bias against Black, Indigenous, and people of color students, BIPOC students, in our nation's predominantly white colleges and universities are hidden in the ways that we have been taught to give feedback in regard to the race in the classroom. So this article talks about how bias harms the way BIPOC students are able to learn and how we as instructors can be a part of the solution. So this is by Ariam. Okay. And then it says bias against BIPOC, students and people, it acts as a roadblock to opportunity. Again, it's acting as a roadblock to opportunity. It's a barrier to resources. And ultimately, it places limitations on how BIPOCs are able to succeed. Again, the biggest thing about biases is they create these roadblocks. It's like, it's just not fair when the teacher says yes to Sally going to the bathroom, but then, Deshaun wants to go, and it's, 5 questions as to why, where is he going? And is he really going to go there? And, if he doesn't return at this time, he's getting a referral. It should not be that way, right? And then it says, but what about in the realm of higher education? The realities of bias against BIPOC students in our nation's predominantly white colleges and universities are hidden in ways, right, that we've been told to give feedback in the classroom. So let's keep going. So this, now it says, at many higher learning institutions, there's also are often a failure narrative at play. So Dina Simmons is a director at Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And she writes that the storyline causes BIPOC students and their teachers to internalize the idea that students are inherently deficient, which is foolishness. Sorry. And in need of a teacher or some intervention to save them from themselves. This is toxic poison in education. Are you serious? So what she's saying is that because there's this failure narrative is trying to have BIPOC students internalize an idea that they are inherently deficient and in need of a teacher or some intervention to save them from themselves. Starts as early as K-12, right, where the foundation is laid, and then school districts that serve predominantly non-white students receive $23 billion less, oh my word, and oh my goodness, in funding than their predominantly white counterparts. The same schools are over-policed and often have no mental health services available for their students. This is sad. $23 billion less. Now, this is coming from Yale, y'all, so I know it's legit. And some people will say, oh, well, we don't need equitable supports. We don't need fiscal supports that make the level ground even. Well, you tell me what you can do with $23 billion as an advance or, as a surplus versus nothing, right? There's definitely going to be a different world experienced with that. So then it says here, while a lack of funding and an abundance of policy play a major role in making it unsafe for BIPOC students to learn, hardship, yes, is further reinforced by a cycle of academic feedback they receive. Okay, this is just a lot, guys. And so it says, in many ways, educators are conditioned to consider BIPOC students differently. Because of the unconscious bias, the work of BIPOC students may be evaluated differently, right, by instructors when offering feedback without even realizing it. Positive feedback bias refers to the tendency of avoiding to give negative feedback to BIPOC students by white instructors because of the fear of doing so will feed into the negative stereotypes of BIPOC students. Wow. And so this is going to keep going. Now it's talking about the imposter syndrome. It says, over time, this treatment compounds and translates to the imposter syndrome, causing an overwhelming feeling of self-doubt and fear that one does not have the ability to absorb or analyze ideas properly. They're talking about the imposter syndrome. It says the imposter syndrome among BIPOC students is heightened at the minimal presence of non-white faculty on campus. So across the nation, they have 70% of college and university faculty are white, while 45% of students are not white. So if the students are unable to see themselves as teachers, how can they envision themselves as being capable learners? That is the golden question of the day. This is probably like the research question. If students are not able to see themselves as teachers, how can they envision themselves as being capable learners? So, now they're talking about a California school district and whatnot. And so it says in a case study of 27 California school district instructors, it was found that having low expectations of Black and Brown students led to the reinforcement of harmful ideologies, which perpetrated whiteness as a racial construct of college-going abilities. Oh, wow. And then it says instructors who practiced a higher degree of race consciousness, however, reported a pedagogy that emphasized positive traits such as self-respect and the view of education as a vehicle for furthering the principles of humanity. So with that said, in conclusion, teaching is a heavy task, but if education is meant to shape the future, we must include all who are a part of the present. And then it says, incorporating elements of anti-racist curriculum, first asking ourselves questions about our students, seeking knowledge, and mirroring practices with BIPOC colleagues. These are ways that we can unlearn biases to move towards more unified teaching methods. Anti-racist curriculum, I think it's better to even say curriculum that is just really inclusive and really celebratory of, diverse leaders and concepts and things like that. So that was a heavier piece there. That was a lot, but I appreciate you guys joining me today on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. That was a good time. And I think there's a lot to chew on in that. So I hope you enjoyed it. And so with that said, if you got on a little bit late and you're like, okay, what's going on? This is the Grit and Equity Talks podcast, and it will be featured on the X Factor EDU network, hosted by Matthew Joseph, and it can be found on Spotify and on my social media outlets. So I want to encourage you to also check out my social media. So I've got Facebook as Miss India White, LinkedIn is The India White, Twitter is Indy Speak and Teach, Instagram is Indy238, YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. I will see many of you guys at these events coming up on the screen in CTM and NCSM, and then all of these other ones, NATM, ICTM, OCTM, ATM&E, and beyond. And then make sure you're checking out the Grit Mini workshop on the Grassroots Workshops website. And check out the website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, or to schedule me for a speaking or coaching event. Let's close this achievement gap. Let's do something. Reading that, and just makes me really want to go out even more and to support, all teachers of all backgrounds, no matter who they are, because we're supporting our students and they need us the most. They need us to stick together. We're better together. So I'm looking forward to some opportunities to work with you guys. So with that said, thanks so much again for joining me on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And until next time,